Jinwoo Park liked the arboretum best when it was empty. The big room was full of earth plants and the air smelled like wet soil. It was a quiet place. On a station orbiting Jupiter, quiet was hard to find. Jinwoo was a structural engineer. His job was to check the metal bones of the station, to listen for cracks or stresses that others could not hear. He preferred machines to people. Machines made sense. He was on the high walkway that morning, his tool belt hanging from his hips. His diagnostic scanner hummed in his hand as he checked the support beams. Below him, the leaves of the banana trees were wide and green. He could see the main path winding through the ferns. It was the only place on the chrysalis station where you could be truly alone. Or so he thought. The first sound was not one of peace. It was the sharp, quick sound of feet on the path. Many feet. Then a voice, clear and firm, but strained. It was a language Jinwoo did not know. The sounds were like water over smooth stones. But the tone was fear. Jinwoo stopped his work. He looked down through the mesh of the walkway. Below, he saw a flash of silver and pale blue. It was the alien princess, Tiara. He had seen her from a distance before in the station's common areas. She was from the Silver people. She looked mostly human, but not quite. Her skin had a soft shine, like a pearl. Her hair was not hair at all, but fine, feather-like strands that moved like silk in the air. She wore a simple gray suit, not her usual formal clothes. Her tiara, a thin circle of metal with a glowing stone, was on her head. Around her were 20 of her own guards. They were also silvera, taller and broader than her. They wore dark uniforms. They were not walking with her. They were surrounding her. Their hands were on the hilts of their weapons, which looked like long, crystal rods. Jinwoo frowned. This was not a normal guard escort. The princess was stepping back, her hands raised. One of the guards, a big one with a scar across his cheekbone, stepped forward. He spoke to her, his voice low and harsh. He reached out not to guide her, but to grab her arm. Princess Tiara pulled her arm away. She said something sharp. The guard's face hardened. He raised his crystal stave. It was not a gesture of respect. The end of it began to glow with a dangerous blue light. Jinwoo's body moved before his mind could catch up. He wasn't a hero. He was a man from Busan who fixed things. But his father had told him long ago, you do not stand and watch when someone is being hurt. It was a simple rule. Hey! Jinwoo shouted. His voice echoed in the quiet arboretum. Every head turned upward. 20 alien faces looked at him. The princess's eyes found his. They were a deep violet, wide with surprise and a desperate hope. In that moment, Jinwoo saw the truth. This was no ceremony. This was an attack. The lead guard snarled something and pointed his stave at Jinwoo. A bolt of blue energy shot upward. Jinwoo ducked behind a thick support beam. The energy hit the metal with a sizzling crack. The smell of ozone filled the air. Jinwoo's heart hammered against his ribs. He had no weapon. He looked around frantically. His engineering rig was nearby. It was a heavy exoframe used for moving big pieces of metal. It was basically metal arms and legs you wore. It was slow and clumsy, but it was strong. He ran to it, his boots clanging on the walkway. More energy bolts zipped past him. He could hear the guards moving below, spreading out. He climbed into the rig's harness and slammed the activation switch. The servos whined to life. He felt the frame lock onto his limbs. It was like being inside a small, powerful machine. He didn't have a plan. He just knew he had to get down there. He went to the nearest maintenance ladder and started climbing down, the rig making his movements loud and heavy. When his feet hit the soft arboretum path, the guards were ready. 6 of them rushed him. Jinwoo swung the rig's large left clamp arm. It was meant for gripping steel plates. It connected with the first guard's chest, not to cut, but to shove. The alien gasped and flew back into 2 others, knocking them into a cluster of ferns. Another guard lunged, his stave aimed like a spear. Jinwoo brought his right arm up. The stave hit the rig's metal forearm, sparking. Jinwoo pushed forward, using the rig's strength. He drove the guard back, stumbling into a small pond with a splash. He was creating chaos, not winning a fight. He was a distraction. He caught another glimpse of Princess Alara. She was trying to move toward the Arboretum's main door, but two guards blocked her way. Jinwoo charged them. He lowered his shoulder, the rig's frame acting like a battering ram. He crashed into the two guards. They grunted and fell apart. "Go!" Jinwoo yelled at the princess, his voice raw. She hesitated for only a second, her violet eyes locking with his. He saw gratitude and a deep, shocking sadness. Then she turned and ran, her figure disappearing through the fern leaves. A searing pain exploded in Jinwoo's side. A guard had struck him with a stave where the rig didn't cover him. The pain was electric and hot. He cried out, staggering. Another blow hit his leg. He fell to one knee, the rig groaning. They closed in on him now, a circle of angry faces. The lead guard stood over him, his stave raised high, its tip glowing brightly. He was saying something, probably something hateful. Jinwoo couldn't understand the words. He just felt tired. He had done what he could. The stave came down. Jinwoo tried to raise his arm to block it, but he was too slow. The crystal weapon connected with the side of his head, just above his temple. There was no sound. There was only a flash of blinding white light, and then a deep, welcoming darkness that pulled him under. The last thing he knew was the smell of wet soil and burned metal. Then, nothing. The darkness was not empty. It was full of pain. A dull, throbbing ache pulsed in time with Jinwoo's heartbeat, centered on the left side of his head. There were other pains too. A sharp complaint from his ribs, a burn on his side, a deep soreness in his leg. They came to him slowly, like distant lights switching on one by one. First came the smell. It was the sharp, clean scent of antiseptic. Not the Arboretum's soil. This was medbay smell. Then came the sound. A soft, steady beep from a machine nearby. The hum of station air recycling. His own breathing. He opened his eyes. The light was low but still made him wince. He was lying on a standard-issue medbed. A thin blanket was pulled up to his chest. A monitor glowed beside him, showing his vital signs in soft green lines. He tried to move his head. A wave of dizziness and nausea washed over him, and he let out a low groan. "Don't try to sit up." The voice was familiar. It was Sumi Kong. She was sitting in a chair next to his bed, a datapad resting on her knees. Her face, usually sharp and clever, was pale with worry. Dark circles hung under her eyes. "You have a severe concussion, 2 cracked ribs, second-degree energy burns, and you look terrible." Jinwoo tried to speak. His mouth was dry. The princess?" he managed to croak. Sumi's lips pressed into a thin line. "She is safe, physically unharmed. That is the only good news." The door to the room slid open. Captain Marcus Thorne walked in. He was a big man, ex-military, with a face that looked like it was carved from stone. He stood at the foot of the bed, his hands clasped behind his back. "Park, you're awake. Good." His voice was flat. "We need to talk about what happened." "The guards," Jinwoo said, the memory rushing back. "They were attacking her." Captain Thorne exchanged a quick look with Sumi. "That is not the report we have received from the Silver delegation," Thorne said. "According to Ambassador Kalen, the princess's uncle, what you witnessed was a high-intensity ritual escort, a traditional Silver practice for times of perceived danger. The raised staves, the forceful movements, it's all part of a cultural performance, a show of protective vigor." Jinwoo stared at him. The pain in his head made it hard to think. A performance? They were going to hit her. "They did hit me." "They say you misinterpreted the ritual," Sumi said softly, her voice tense. "They say you burst into a sacred proceeding, armed with industrial equipment, and assaulted 20 diplomatic security officers. You caused significant disruption and injury." "I was defending her," Jinwoo insisted, pushing himself up on his elbows. The room spun. "She was afraid. I saw her face." "What you saw is not the point," Thorne said, his tone hardening. "The point is what the Silver say happened. First contact protocols are built on respecting cultural differences, even when we don't understand them. You violated those protocols in the most dramatic way possible. Ambassador Kalen is furious. He is demanding consequences. Jinwoo fell back against the pillow, a cold feeling settling in his stomach that had nothing to do with his injuries. What consequences? For now, you are confined to quarters once the medic releases you, Thorne said. Your engineering access is revoked. You will have no contact with the Silver delegation. A formal review board will be convened. Your future on this station and likely with the agency will be decided there. The captain's words were like physical blows. Jinwoo had worked for years to get a posting on the Chrysalis. It was a good job. Paid for his mother's treatments back in Busan. Now it was crumbling because he tried to help someone. It wasn't a ritual, Jinwoo said again, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. The Silvera have provided holo recordings, Sumi said, not meeting his eyes. Edited clips. They show you charging in, swinging the rig. They show the guards reacting to you. It looks bad, Jinwoo. The betrayal in her voice was worse than Thorne's sternness. Sumi was a xenolinguist. Her whole world was building bridges of understanding. He had knocked one down. Get some rest, Park, Captain Thorne said, turning to leave. You're going to need it for the inquiry. Consider yourself lucky they aren't pressing for immediate deportation and criminal charges. Yet, the door slid shut behind him, leaving Jinwoo alone with Sumi and the steady beep of the monitor. The silence stretched. Jinwoo looked at the ceiling, the white tiles blurring slightly. You believe me, don't you, Sumi? She was quiet for a long time. She put her datapad down. I believe you saw what you saw, she said carefully. But the Silvera culture, it is deeply layered. Their rituals can seem violent to us. The meaning is in the symbolism, not the action. It is possible, just possible, you misunderstood. He turned his head to look at her. The movement hurt. Her eyes. You didn't see her eyes. I didn't, Sumi admitted. She stood up, smoothing her uniform. I have to get back. The diplomatic corps is in damage control mode. They have me translating apologies. She walked to the door, then paused. Just, for your own sake, Jinwoo, when the board asks, maybe consider that you might have made a mistake. It could go easier for you. Then she was gone. Jinwoo was alone with the beeping machine and the pain. The cold feeling in his stomach grew. He was a fool. A reckless, impulsive fool. He had thrown away everything because he didn't stop to think. He replayed the scene in his mind. The raised stave, the fear on the princess's face. It had felt so real. But maybe Sumi was right. Maybe he was just a human who saw a threat where there was only tradition. He closed his eyes, shame washing over him, hotter and more painful than the burn on his side. He had fought 20 guards for nothing. The station medic kept Jinwoo for 2 days. The time passed in a blur of soft light, bland nutrient drinks, and the quiet hum of medical machines. The physical pain faded into a collection of dull aches. The shame, however, did not fade. It sat inside him like a cold, heavy stone. On the third morning, a junior medical officer scanned him one last time. Concussion symptoms are clear. The bone knitter has sealed the ribs. The burns are healed. You are cleared for light duty, she said, not looking up from her tablet. Captain Thorne's orders supersede that, of course. Your confinement stands. They gave him back his clothes, the ones he had been wearing in the Arboretum. They were clean, but he could see a small, scorched hole near the left side where the energy stave had struck him. He changed in silence and walked out of the medbay. The corridors of the Chrysalis station felt different. Before, he was just another crew member in blue engineering overalls, invisible. Now, people noticed him. He saw the looks. Some were quick glances of curiosity. Others were longer stares, followed by hushed whispers as he passed. A pair of environmental technicians saw him and turned down a side hallway, avoiding him completely. His quarters were in the mid-level crew sector. The room was small. A bed, a desk, a small viewport showing the endless starscape and the swirling orange and white face of Jupiter. It was a room he used mostly for sleeping. Now it felt like a cell. The official notice was on his desk screen. It was a dry, formal document outlining the terms of his confinement. He was not to leave his quarters except for meals in the designated crew mess hall at specific times. He was to have no contact with the Silver delegation or any of their areas. All his system access codes were suspended. A security review was pending. He sat on the edge of his bed and put his head in his hands. His father's face came to his mind. His father had been a fisherman. Practical man. He would have shaken his head at this. You stick to your own business, son. The ocean is trouble enough. You don't go looking for storms. Jinwoo hadn't been looking for a storm. He had just been fixing a beam. But he had walked into one anyway, and now he was drowning in the aftermath. He followed the rules. At the appointed lunch hour, he went to the crew mess. The room was busy, filled with the clatter of trays and the murmur of conversation. The moment he walked in, a silence fell over his section of the room. It wasn't total silence, but it was a noticeable drop in noise. He felt dozens of eyes on his back as he got his food, a simple stew and rice, and took it to an empty table in the corner. He ate alone. No one joined him. A few people he knew from engineering, men he had shared coffee with, looked his way but then quickly looked down at their own meals. He understood. He was trouble. On a station where everyone depended on everyone else, being the cause of a major diplomatic incident made you a problem. Problems were avoided. After lunch, he returned to his room. There was nothing to do. His work console was locked. His personal tablet could only access basic entertainment feeds. He tried to watch a news stream from Earth, but he couldn't focus. The swirling colors of Jupiter held his gaze for a long time. The worst part was the doubt. Lying in the quiet of his room, with nothing to distract him, Sumi's words echoed in his head. It is possible, just possible, you misunderstood. He went over the memory again and again. The guards' faces. Had they looked angry or just intensely focused? The princess's fear. Could it have been part of a ritualized show of emotion? The more he thought about it, the less certain he became. The clarity of the moment was gone, replaced by the fog of pain and these new, terrible questions. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe he had ruined his life for a cultural misunderstanding. The thought made him feel sick. Days passed in this way. He slept poorly. He ate his meals in silence. He exercised in his small room to keep his body from getting stiff. He was a ghost in the machine of the station, moving on a very short, prescribed path. A week after the incident, he was returning from dinner. The corridor to his quarters was quiet. As he approached his door, he saw something. A small, white card was tucked into the seam where the door met the frame. It wasn't official station material. He pulled it out. On it, in neat, handwritten Korean, were 2 words. Thank you. There was no name. He looked up and down the empty corridor. Whoever left it was gone. He held the card, a confusing warmth fighting against the cold shame in his chest. Was it a joke? Was it sincere? He didn't know. He took the card inside and placed it on his desk. It was the only personal thing in the room. That night, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The thank you card did not erase his problems. He was still confined. He was still in trouble. But for the first time since waking in the medbay, the doubt loosened its grip just a little. Someone believed him. Someone, somewhere on this silent station, knew he had not been a fool. He fell asleep thinking of the princess's violet eyes, not in fear, but in that final moment of clear, grateful understanding. He held on to that image as he drifted off, the card a small, white secret on his desk. Jinwoo woke slowly. The sleep had been deep, the kind that comes from a mind too tired to dream. The ever-present, low hum of the station's life support was the first thing he noticed. The second was the faint, cool light from the viewport, where Jupiter hung like a giant, striped eye. He stretched, his body protesting with the usual chorus of aches. The cracked ribs were a dull memory. The burn was a faint pink mark. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. He rubbed his face, his fingers scratching against the stubble on his jaw. Another day in the quiet box of his quarters. He stood and walked to the small washroom. He splashed water on his face, the cold shock a brief, sharp clarity. He dried off with a rough towel and walked back into the main room. Heading for the closet to get his day clothes, he stopped. His eyes, still blurry with sleep, caught a glimmer on his bedside table. He had left nothing there. He never did. Just the lamp and the clock. But there was something else. He took a step closer. The light from the viewport caught it again. A shimmer of silver and pale blue. His breath caught in his throat. He knew what it was even before his mind could form the words. It was Princess Ilara's tiara. The delicate, looping crown of metal looked as if it was made from frozen starlight. It was not heavy or thick. It was a woven circle, impossibly fine. In its front, set like a captured teardrop, was the gem. It was the color of a twilight sky, holding shifting swirls of deep violet and silver inside. It seemed to glow with its own soft, internal light. Jin Woo did not move. He stared. A cold tingle ran down his spine, followed by a wave of heat. This was impossible. His door was locked. It was always locked. The station had security. He was a confined person. How could this be here? He looked at the door. It was sealed shut, just as he had left it. He looked at the viewport. It was solid, reinforced plexi, not an opening. There were no vents large enough. The tiara sat on the flat, gray surface of the table as if it had always been there. Cautiously, like he was approaching a live animal, he reached out. His fingertips touched the metal. It was cool but not cold. Smooth, felt lighter than it looked. He picked it up. It had no weight at all, really. Holding it, he felt a strange sense of stillness. The confused noise in his head quieted. This was no trick. This was real. The princess's most personal item, the symbol of her rank, was in his hand, in his private room. He remembered it clearly on her head in the arboretum, gleaming among her feather-like hair. Why? What did it mean? Was it a message? Was it a trap? His first panic thought was to call security, to report it, to say he had found it. But he stopped. Captain Thorne's stern face filled his mind. The official story was a ritual misunderstanding. If he brought them the tiara, what would they say? They would say he stole it. They would say this was proof of his crime. The diplomatic incident would become a galactic scandal. He would be sent to a prison asteroid for sure. He could not tell anyone. But he could not just leave it on the table. He stood there for a long time, holding the tiara, turning it over in his hands. The gem seemed to pulse gently, as if breathing. It was beautiful and terrifying. It was a secret he did not ask for. A silent, profound question mark left in the night. Finally, he moved. He went to his small desk and opened the bottom drawer. It held spare data cords and some old notebooks. He emptied it. He took a clean undershirt from his closet and laid it gently in the drawer, making a soft nest. He placed the tiara inside. For a moment, it lay there, glowing against the white fabric. It looked wrong, hidden away. It belonged in the open, on a pillow of velvet, not in an engineer's drawer. He closed the drawer slowly. He sat down at his desk, his heart beating fast. The quiet of his room was now a different kind of quiet. Before, it was the quiet of isolation, of being ignored. Now it was the quiet of a shared secret. He was not alone in this room. The tiara's presence changed everything. He thought of the white card. Thank you. This was more than a thank you. This was something huge. Something he could not understand. He had to find out what it meant. But he was confined. He had no access. He could not go to the silver sections. He could not ask anyone official. There was only one person he could talk to. One person who might listen and who might know something. Sumi. But reaching out to her was risky. Her messages might be watched. His were certainly watched. He could not just call her. He sat for an hour, thinking. The tiara in the drawer felt like a magnet, pulling at his thoughts. He was no diplomat. He was no hero. He was a man with a problem he could not fix with tools. He looked at his hands, the hands that had operated the rig, that had fought. Now they were empty. He had to get to Sumi. He had to show her. She was the key. She understood languages, symbols. Maybe she could understand this. He stood up. His confinement rules said he could go to the crew mess for meals. That was his only window. Sumi sometimes ate in the officer's mess, which was nearby. If he timed it right, if he was lucky, he might see her. It was a thin chance, but the Tiara's silent presence in the drawer made it a chance he had to take. The game had changed, and he was now a player whether he wanted to be or not. The wait was agony. Jinwoo sat through the morning in his quarters, the closed drawer pulling at his attention like a gravity well. He tried to read, but the words meant nothing. He watched the slow swirl of Jupiter's storms, but all he saw was the shifting violet light of the gem. Finally, the clock marked the start of the lunch period. He left his room, his movements feeling obvious and clumsy. He walked to the crew mess, his eyes scanning every corridor junction, every passing face. He saw no one he knew. The mess hall was its usual noisy self. He got his food, a protein loaf and steamed vegetables, and took his usual isolated table. He didn't eat. He just pushed the food around, watching the entrance point 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Doubt began to creep in. What if she wasn't coming? What if she ate at her desk today? His plan was fragile, built on a single chance. Then he saw her. Sumi walked into the mess, not in her usual diplomatic corps jacket, but in a simple gray shirt. She looked tired. She got a bowl of soup and a roll and began looking for a place to sit. Her eyes passed over his table, then snapped back. She hesitated. Sitting with him was not a good idea. Everyone knew that. Jinwoo caught her eye. He didn't nod or smile. He just looked at her, trying to put every ounce of urgency into his gaze. Then, very deliberately, he looked down at his hands, which were resting on the table. He opened them slightly, as if holding something invisible, then closed them into fists. He looked back at her. Sumi stared. Her face was unreadable. For a terrible moment, he thought she would turn away. Then, with a slight sigh, she walked over and set her tray down across from him. She didn't speak. She sat and began to eat her soup, her posture stiff. "Thank you for sitting," Jinwoo said quietly, his voice low. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, not looking up from her bowl. "They're watching you. You know that, right?" "I know. This is important, Sumi. More important than my confinement." She shook her head slightly, a warning. "Jinwoo, please, do not make this worse. The review board is tomorrow. Just keep your head down." "I can't," he said. He leaned forward a little. "I need you to come to my room, after your shift. I need to show you something. No messages. In person." She finally looked up, her eyes sharp with frustration. "Are you crazy? I cannot be seen going to your quarters. What could possibly be that important?" "I can't say here." He held her gaze. "It's about the princess. It changes everything." Sumi studied his face. She was looking for the panic, the confusion she had seen before. But he saw her recognize something else. A new certainty. A gravity. Her professional curiosity warred with her sense of caution. The linguist in her won. "My shift ends at 1900. I will walk past Corridor Junction D7 on my way to my own quarters. If you are there, and if the corridor is completely clear, I will follow you. For 2 minutes only. Do you understand?" Jinwoo nodded.
Jonction D7.
1905. "Thank you, Sumi." She didn't acknowledge his thanks. She ate 2 more spoonfuls of soup, stood up, and left without another word, leaving her half-finished meal behind. The afternoon was the longest of Jinwoo's life. At 1850, he left his room. He took a slow, indirect route, his heart hammering against his ribs. He reached junction D7 at exactly 1904. The corridor was empty, just a long, silent tube of gray metal and soft light. He waited. 1905. Sumi appeared from the opposite direction. She walked briskly, as if on a normal errand. When she saw him, she gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. He turned and walked back toward his quarters. He heard her footsteps, 10 meters behind him. He reached his door, tapped in his code, and entered. He held the door open just a crack. A second later, she slipped inside, and the door sealed shut behind her. She stood with her back against the wall, her arms crossed. "This is a very bad idea," she said. her voice tight. Wordlessly, Jin-woo went to his desk. He knelt, opened the bottom drawer, and carefully lifted out the folded undershirt. He carried it to his bed, placed it down, and unfolded the fabric. The tiara lay revealed, its metal threads and the swirling gem glowing softly in the room's light. Sumi's breath left her in a sharp gasp. All the color drained from her face. She uncrossed her arms and took a stumbling step forward. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. It can't be. It was on my table when I woke up this morning," Jin-woo said. "I didn't steal it. I don't know how it got here." "I know you didn't steal it," Sumi said, her voice hollow with awe. She approached the bed as if the tiara was a live bomb. She didn't touch it. She just stared. "Oh, Jin-woo, you don't understand. This is catastrophic. Or it is miraculous." "What does it mean?" he asked, his own fear rising at her reaction. "For the silvera," Sumi said slowly, her eyes fixed on the gem. "Words are for simple things, weather, schedules, jokes, but the deepest truths, oaths, debts, gratitude, bonds, these are communicated through objects, given in secret, without explanation. The meaning is in the act of giving and in the object itself." She finally looked at him, her eyes wide. "This is her crown, Jin-woo. It is not just a piece of jewelry. It is a piece of herself, her identity, her authority. For her to give this to you, in this way." Sumi shook her head, struggling to find the words. "This is not a thank you. This is a songyak, a life bond, a debt of essence. She is saying her life is forever tied to yours because you saved it. It is the highest, most profound statement her people can make." The room was silent. The meaning settled over Jin-woo, heavy and immense. "Sumi," he said quietly, "the ritual escort story, it was a lie," she said, certainty hardening her voice. "A complete and total lie. No silvera would ever part with this, for any reason, unless the need was absolute. Unless the danger was real. You were right. Her guards weren't protecting her. They were trying to kill her or take her. You didn't misinterpret anything. You stopped an assassination. The truth was a cold, clear light. It washed away the last of Jin-woo's doubt and shame. He had not been a fool. He had been a witness. He had been right. But the light also showed the danger they were in. The tiara on the bed was not just a gift. It was proof of a crime. And the criminals were still out there, powerful and hidden." Sumi paced the small room, her mind working fast. "Ambassador Kalen. It has to be him. He is her uncle. If she were gone, he would control the silver delegation. He gave the false story. He controls the guards. We have to tell someone," Jin-woo said. "Who?" Sumi stopped pacing. "Captain Thorne? He will follow protocol. He will take the tiara as evidence and present it to Kalen for verification. Kalen will say you are a thief and the tiara is fake or that you stole it during the fight. We will be arrested, and the princess will be left with no one. So what do? We use what we have," Sumi said, her voice low and intense. "We have the truth, and we have you. Me? I'm confined. I have no access. You have more than you think," she said. "You are an engineer. You know this station's skeleton. And now you have this." She pointed to the tiara. "Its meaning gives you a kind of authority with the right people." "What people?" "The princess is not without allies," Sumi said. "There must be a few among the silvera still loyal to her. They would recognize the meaning of the tiara's absence. We need to find them, and we need evidence that Kalen is sabotaging her." Jin-woo thought. His mind, used to solving problems of stress and load, began to work on this new problem. The life support in their wing, environmental controls, communication lines. If he's making a move, he'd want control. Or he'd create an accident. Sumi nodded. "Can you look at those systems?" "Without your official access." A faint memory sparked in Jinwoo's mind. The secondary maintenance crawlways. For emergencies. My old level 3 engineering codes might still work on those panels. They're hardwired, separate from the main system. Thorn might not have thought to block those. It was a plan. A thin, dangerous plan. Sumi had to leave. Her absence would be noticed. They agreed she would use her diplomatic access to observe patterns, which Silvera moved freely, who looked afraid. She would try to identify a potential ally. Jinwoo rewrapped the tiara and placed it back in its drawer. It was their most important piece, but it could not be played yet. Late that night, when the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, Jinwoo left his room. He moved not like a confined man, but like a part of the station's machinery. He took service corridors, narrow and rarely used. He reached an unmarked panel in a wall near the water reclamation unit. He pried it open with his multi-tool. Inside was a crawl space, lined with cables and pipes. It was hot and close. He crawled in, pulling the panel shut behind him. He moved through the belly of the chrysalis. He knew these paths from his first month, during station familiarization. He crawled for 20 minutes until he reached a junction that served the Silvera diplomatic wing. A small, dusty access screen was there for engineers. He pulled a connector from his pocket and plugged his personal tablet into the port. He entered his old codes. For a second, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered to life. He had access, not to everything, but to the environmental and internal comms subsystems for the wing. He ran diagnostics. First, everything looked normal. Then he saw it. A subroutine attached to the oxygen mix for the princess's private rooms. It was set to slowly introduce a harmless, odorless gas from the botany lab, a gas that was harmless to humans, but which Sumi's notes said was a powerful sedative to the Silvera. It was set to activate in 48 hours. A slow, sleepy accident. He found another thing. All external communications from the princess's terminal were being copied and rerouted to a private server. Kalen's servered IT was evidence. Not enough for a court, but enough for the truth. He downloaded the data packets. As he prepared to disconnect, he saw one more thing. A small, isolated life sign monitor, separate from the main system. It was in a small sitting room adjacent to the princess's chamber. One Silvera life sign was logged there, constantly, never leaving. A prisoner in a gilded cage. He crawled back, the data burning in his pocket. He felt no triumph, only a cold focus. The station was sick and he had found the infection. The next day, at their brief mealtime meeting, he told Sumi what he found. Her face was grim. The gas. That's how he'll do it. She falls asleep and doesn't wake up. A tragedy. She leaned closer. I think I have found someone. A younger Silvera aide. He always looks down when Kalen is near. He eats alone. Today I dropped a pen near him. When I picked it up, I whispered the Silvera word for Tiara. He flinched. He knows something. They had their ally. They had their evidence. They had a deadline. The final piece came from Jinwoo. The public alignment ceremony. In 2 days. Everyone will be there. It's the perfect cover for an accident in her room. And it's the perfect place for us. For us to do what? Sumi asked. To tell the truth, Jinwoo said. To everyone. At once. It was a huge risk. But the quiet engineer was done with silence. He had fought with his hands once and lost. This time he would fight with the truth. And he would not be fighting alone. He had a linguist, a silent ally, and a princess's trust woven in starlight. It would have to be enough. The alignment ceremony was the biggest event on the Chrysalis Station calendar. Representatives from every species on board gathered in the grand atrium. The huge dome showed a perfect, clear view of Jupiter and the stars. It was a symbol of unity and shared purpose. Jinwoo stood at the back of the crowd. He wore his simple engineer's uniform. He was not supposed to be here, but in the press of crew and delegates, no one stopped him. His heart was a drum in his chest. Sumi was across the room, near the diplomatic podiums. The young Silvera aide, whose name was Liren, stood nervously with the other Silvera staff. He did not look at Jinwoo. At the front, on a raised stage, stood the important people. Captain Thorn, Ambassador Kalen, and Princess Alara. She wore a formal gown of silver, but her head was bare. Her face was calm, but her eyes scanned the crowd. When they found Jinwoo, They paused for the briefest second. A look passed between them, not a smile, an acknowledgement. The ceremony began. Captain Thorne gave a speech about cooperation. Then he introduced Ambassador Kalen. The tall Silvera stepped forward, his expression grave and noble. "Friends," Kalen said, his voice smooth, "we gather in peace. Yet, a shadow has fallen on our unity. A human, driven by misunderstanding, attacked my niece's protectors. He even stole a sacred symbol of her office." He paused, letting the words hang. "But we are a forgiving people. We ask only for the return of what was taken, and for the man to face human justice. Then we can move forward." It was the perfect move. Public, reasonable, and a complete lie. Captain Thorne looked uncomfortable. He turned to the crowd. "Is Engineer Park present?" This was the moment. Jinwoo took a deep breath. He began to walk forward. The crowd parted for him, a sea of staring faces. He felt very alone. He reached the open space before the stage. He looked up at Kalen, then at Captain Thorne. "I am here," Jinwoo said, his voice clear in the quiet atrium. "Engineer Park," Thorne said, "Ambassador Kalen has made a serious claim. Do you have the princess's tiara?" Jinwoo did not look at the ambassador. He looked at Princess Alara. "Ido." A murmur went through the crowd. Kalen's eyes glittered with cold victory. "Then return it, and your punishment may be less severe." Jinwoo shook his head.
No.
The murmur grew louder. Thorne's face darkened. "Park, this is not the time for defiance." "I am not defying you, Captain," Jinwoo said. He turned to face the crowd, the humans and aliens. He was just an engineer. He was not a speaker. He spoke simply. "I am here to tell you what really happened in the Arboretum. The guards were not protecting the princess. They were attacking her. I saw her fear. I acted to stop it." Kalen scoffed. "More human stories. Where is your proof?" "My proof," Jinwoo said, "is that the princess gave me her tiara. Not because I stole it. Because for her people, giving such a thing is the highest truth. It is a life bond. A songyak. She was saying thank you for saving her life. And she was saying her life is now tied to mine." He pulled the small bundle from his pocket. He unfolded the cloth. The tiara lay in his palm, the gem glowing softly. A gasp rippled through the Silvera in the crowd. They understood. Their eyes went from the tiara to their princess, bareheaded on the stage. The truth of it was undeniable to them. Kalen was furious. "He lies. He has twisted our customs. That object is a fake." Then, Sumi stepped forward from the crowd. She held up her datapad. "I am xenolinguist Sumi Kong. I can confirm the meaning of the songyak. It is as Engineer Park says. It is a bond of absolute truth." She turned to Kalen. "But if you need more proof, Ambassador, I have it here." She tapped her pad. Environmental system logs from the Silvera wing, showing a scheduled release of somnol gas into the princess's rooms in 12 hours. A gas harmless to us, but lethal to her. She tapped again. And communication logs, showing all of Princess Alara's messages copied to your private server. Is that also our misunderstanding? Kalen's face went from anger to panic. He took a step back. This is human trickery. Security, arrest these liars. But the Silvera guards on the stage did not move. They looked at Liren, the young aide. He stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. It is true. I have seen the orders. The guards in the Arboretum were told to make it look like an accident. Ambassador Kalen wishes to rule in my princess's place. The silence in the atrium was complete. The story had shattered. Captain Thorne looked at the data, at the tiara, at the faces of the Silvera. He saw the real truth. He nodded to his own security officers. Ambassador Kalen, you are relieved. Please come with us. As human security moved forward, the Silvera guards finally moved to block them. They gently took Kalen by his own arms. We will take our own into custody, their leader said to Thorne. Our laws will judge him. They led a stunned and silent Kalen away. The ceremony was over. The crowd began to buzz with talk. Captain Thorne approached Jinwoo. He looked at the tiara, then at Jinwoo's face. "It seems I owe you an apology, engineer, and my thanks. The review board is dismissed. Your full access is restored." Jinwoo just nodded. The fight was done. He felt empty and light. Then Princess Ilara descended from the stage. The crowd fell quiet again, watching. She walked up to Jinwoo. She did not bow. She did not take the tiara from his hand. Instead, she placed her own hand gently over his, so they both held the crown together. Her skin was cool and smooth. She spoke. Her voice was like quiet music. "Sumi," standing close, translated softly for all to hear. "The debt remains," the princess said, her violet eyes holding Jinwoo's. "But the friendship is yours, if you will have it." Jinwoo looked at their hands, joined over the symbol of her world. He thought of the fight, the fear, the long silence. He had not wanted any of this, but he had done what was right. That was all a man could do. He nodded again. A small, sure movement. "I will," he said. A soft sound, like a sigh of relief, went through the watching Silvera. The princess gently took the tiara. She did not put it on. She held it to her chest. She offered Jinwoo a final, slight incline of her head, a gesture of deep respect. Then she turned and walked away, her people parting for her. Sumi came to Jinwoo's side. "You did it," she said quietly. Jinwoo watched the princess go. He thought of the tiara on his bedside table, a silent message in the dark. It had been a question, and now they had an answer. He was not a hero. He was an engineer, but he had fixed something more important than a beam. And for now, that was enough.